What an incredible project, my school project. So well done from our side as well. It's amazing to see. Almost wants to makes me want to cry if I see the nice things that other people, like the school, helping the under-resourced school. So thanks so much to you. Right, creating a culture of reading. First of all, the question, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Is it easy? No, it's not. Is it going to be quick? No, it's going to take some time. And it's going to involve a lot of people. But it is possible. So first of all, if we want to create something, we have to understand it. Do you agree? We can't try to create something if we don't know what we're trying to create. Because it's easy to say, let's create a culture of reading. But what do we mean by a culture of reading? In a school where you have a reading culture, every teacher becomes a reading teacher. And by every teacher, I mean the mathematics teacher also becomes a reading teacher. Why? Because mathematics is another language. It's not as if you shouldn't be able to read, and who better to teach them to read that language than a mathematics teacher? Me, as a language teacher, I can't teach them how to read mathematics properly. The mathematics teacher should teach them how to read mathematics and the language of mathematics. So what do we get? We get children sitting in a classroom where they have to solve a word problem. Yes, it is language, but it's mathematical language. They have to be able to translate that into something with numbers. And as a language teacher, I can't teach them how to do that. The mathematics teacher should teach them. And likewise in social science, natural science, every single subject in the school has a language of its own, the terminology. And there's no one better to teach a child to read that language than the subject teacher. So in a school where there's a culture of learning or reading, every teacher is a reading teacher. So if you're a principal, start thinking about a strategy for creating a culture of reading. And start thinking about, how am I going to involve my management team? How am I going to involve my teachers? How are we going to phrase this and put it on paper so that everybody knows that this school has this policy about reading, and reading is one of the highest priorities. And in that policy, define reading. Say, reading is making meaning, because the goal for reading is always comprehension. It's never to get from the top to the bottom. So if you are a pretend reader, you're not really a reader. You have to make meaning.
So the first thing, something I'm very passionate about, is what does the future demand, and why is reading important for the future? Learners today, what you must remember, are digital natives. And what that means is people who were brought up or born during the age where technology became so familiar. So for some of the older people amongst us, when you were born, there were no TVs necessarily, there were no phones that were widely used. Maybe there were still telegrams, and as time has evolved, and even between the time when most of you were born and I was born and today, things have completely changed. And today, children at the age of 1, of 2, even my nephew who's 1.5 years old, can unlock my iPhone and find a game. You can promote it through leadership. So you've seen some of the examples, you've heard what Bessie said regarding it starts with the principal, and it starts with you as an educator being an example to the children about reading. I think one important point is we shouldn't just assume that if you as a principal go to your teachers and say, I read, I love reading, this is our culture, that'll just automatically happen. Not every single teacher necessarily had the opportunity to read all their life, didn't have necessarily access to books all their life for pleasure. So there's a bit of teacher development, a bit of training and support that you as a principal or school management team will have to provide to teachers in order to enable them to be examples to children. So how do you make sure that whatever they learn in English or in Afrikaans regarding the comprehension of language gets translated into whatever they do in science and maths and whatever they do in other subjects. You have to integrate the learning and not only teach reading or encourage reading in an English or Afrikaans or whatever other language you use setting, but enforce it in all the learning that they do in the school. Rewards and gamification are super important. People love getting stuff for free. It's a common phenomenon. If I told you now there's a competition for whoever remembered the last video, you'd all be recalling what you did or looking if you took a photo. People love stuff for free. So why not exploit that by putting little duckies or whatever you have as your resource to give those rewards and gamification. But it's important not to make it forced. So that's a point I really agree with Betsy. Do not make it forced, make it fun. So if I don't feel like playing this week, you don't have to. But just know that, if you see all your friends getting free stuff and you don't have free stuff, trust me, you'll want some free stuff. And leverage technology. So you shouldn't see technology as a substitute to book reading. You shouldn't see technology as a threat to reading. Even now, I read less books, but I read a lot more because I'm reading on my phone all the time. I'm reading emails. I'm reading billboards. I watch quite a few films in different languages, so now I'm even reading movies. So there's different ways you can read. It doesn't just mean reading in a book. How do you use the resources that are available to your learners at home or in the school environment to enable them to be able to read better? So I'm not an educator. I don't have a PhD or a master's in education. I'm actually, for my sins, a chartered accountant and spent a lot of time in finance and so forth. But because education is such an important thing in our country, I decided to take quite a bit of a pay cut and join a company and transform a company that's trying to help focus on how do we help support education. So there's a lot of teachers in this country who are underpaid, if I'm frank, and they're actually quite good. Then you have a lot of students who are in under-resourced schools, don't have access to right teaching, don't even have access to schooling maybe, are being taught at home by their parents who might not have access. So you have this pool of knowledge of really good teachers and these students and learners who want to talk to these teachers, but they have no way of connecting. So they're trying to make like an Uber, if you want to call it that, where you can go online as a teacher, you can assist learners anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, to be able to learn, plus you earn money yourself. So that's the company called Tutor Me. You can check it out. There's also going to be some really, really cool developments happening later this year, so you can watch that space. So that's basically what we're doing as a company called FutureLearn. And I hope we don't go bankrupt because then I'll have to go back to being an accountant. But hopefully it does work, and hopefully we do make an impact to educate children in South Africa.